At the recording. But my name's Alex. I'm one of the site coordinators working for Teddy at United Way this year for Vita. It's my second year being a site coordinator, but I'm working on my CPA to get my public accounting certification for taxes. So Teddy asked me to take a break in doing the site coordinator stuff and try and help train new volunteers, as we're a little short on volunteer hours so far. So we're hoping to get everybody trained up and at a site soon, which is why we're having all of the trainings all in one week. Normally they're spread out over a couple of weeks because it's going to be a lot of information. But there's a bunch of other site coordinators along with me that'll be able to help answer any questions as you're going along, as you're taking tests. Once you're at the sites, we're all there to help support you in order to make sure that you can succeed. So what I have on the screen right now is just the overall volunteer training procedure. So we're at this part right here. We're just beginning it. In the next 2 to 3 hours, I don't think we'll take the full 3 hours. We're going to go over all the blue, which is the orientation and intake. That's the bare minimum that we need to volunteer so that you can be an intake volunteer. Everything else then is for if you are going to prepare tax returns for taxpayers. So this is a quick overview of what we're going to go over. We're going to go over the volunteer standards of conduct. It's the very basics of, what it means to be a volunteer and how to make sure we're following all the IRS requirements. And then we'll go into some information about the intake and how we process intake and then testing around that. And then the different resources that we use. The biggest one is the 4012. That's what we'll mainly use for if you ever have any questions about what to do. This is what the IRS has for guidelines. And then the last step, we'll be talking about the quote unquote homework, which is just starting on the advanced certification exam for preparing taxes. If at any point I'm going too fast or if you have questions, just say something or raise your hand. I think Zoom has like a raise hand feature. Otherwise, you can just unmute and say, hey, I have a quick question, and I'll do my best to answer. Great. So we'll go ahead and start off on the probably the most important link that you'll have, which is this Link Learn Taxes certification. This is where you'll go to take all of the exams to say that you're past the volunteer standards, how to do intake, and how to do the actual exams for preparation, basic and advanced. Better instructions here. So to volunteer, you are required to be registered and certified via the Link Learn Taxes. It has a bunch of useful information as well as it has the testing materials and other quick links. So right here is the link that you need for that. I'm going to go ahead and put that in the Zoom chat so you can copy and paste it. So I just put that in the Zoom chat. You're going to need that in order to become a volunteer. And so you'll need to create a username and password. Recommend we do that now while we're on this call, just in case there are any issues. I can help assist you if you have any issues filling that out and getting signed up. I'll pull up this as if I was creating an account. So for self-registration, you're signing up for group 1 to be a Vita volunteer. If spec OPI applies to you, you can go ahead and do that. But for the most part, it's going to be no for these questions. You don't need to take the site coordinator certification. You're not an instructor, not a territory manager. Yes, you do plan to volunteer in the Vita/TCE program. Your training source is Lincoln Learn Taxes e-learning. And you have to put in your first and last name, come up with the username and password, a valid email address. Because that's if you forget your password, that's where it'll go for you to reset it. And then you put your address, what time zone. If you have volunteered before, there's a section for that. And then the rest of this is for certified pairs, like if you're a CPA or an EA, something like that, you'll have a PTIN number, CTEC number, but it's not required. So this account is one of my other site coordinators, so I'll go ahead and log in as her. So once you've created the account, this is the screen that you'll see. These are the two exams that you have to pass no matter what in order to volunteer at all with Vita. The volunteer standards of conduct, which is the first thing we'll go over. It's just, what kind of requirements does the IRS set for you that you have to follow? And then the intake and interview and quality review. That's the steps in order to prepare someone to get ready for taxes, make sure they have all their documents, all their IDs look good, they're not missing anything, and that it's something that we can prepare, as there are several cases that it's out of scope for us where we just can't prepare their return. It's more than we're eligible to do. And this is the site coordinator, which you don't need. And then this is the advanced exam, where if you are going to be preparing taxpayer returns for them, you need to have either the basic or the advanced exam. We only go over the advanced exam, but the basic is a simpler version of the advanced exam. And if you pass the advanced, you don't have to take the basic. To pass, you need an 80%. On all of these exams, you have to get an 80% in order to count as passing. This is stuff that I've already talked about for the signing up. No, you can only have one email address for your account, or one account per email address. So you should make sure you're only using ever one email address. And if you have to reset your password, you can go ahead and do that. This is the screen that I just already showed. So once you register, you should have this show up. It says you should be good to go, continue. You can go to your account details page. You're able to log in. And so you can see all the different exams that you're eligible to take and which ones you have already passed, which ones you haven't. So the biggest thing is, so in order to participate, you have to, like I said, take this volunteer standards of conduct exam. There is a training which can be accessed on the central portal page. And will have all the answers that you need. All tests are open book, open note. You can have access to as much information. You can Google a question if you're not sure. You could send your site coordinator, myself, a quick message and be like, hey, do you know this answer? And I can help you find the answer, but I can't give you the answer. So if you have, here's my thought process. This is what I'm thinking. Do you think this works? And then I could help from there. But we can't give you an answer. We can just help you get to the answer. So once you click one of these exams, what you'll see is this little pop-up right here, which shows the course number, what you need to pass. And you go ahead and click launch, and that'll launch the assessment. So like I said, 80%, you have to pass the volunteer standards of conduct exam. You get 2 attempts of every exam. If you need another one, then you'll need to talk to Teddy and a site coordinator. So that way we can discuss it and open that back up. Once you pass, there'll be this view my certificate right here. For you can print the certificate. It'll also update your volunteer agreement, which is what we need in order to certify and check that you have passed the exams that you said you passed. The next important exam is the intake interview quality review exam. Everybody has to pass this. You can't skip it. It's a 10 question exam. Again, it's a super easy one, as well as right here. You'll see that there's a specific training for it as well, which opens up, I believe it's a PowerPoint for that one. That again will have pretty much all the answers you could ever need, or you could do a quick Google search. Will help you find them pretty easily. After you've passed the exam, that's when you're going to sign your 13615, which is what we need to certify that you passed everything. You electronically sign it and just put in your name and the date. And then below that, that click here to open is when you can pull open the PDF form. It'll all be filled out with your name, date you passed everything, address, phone number, everything we'll need. And then you can just go ahead and send that over to Teddy, or to one of us site coordinators, and we'll pass it along to him, either printed or as an email. This is what we have to have on access to as an IRS standard. If we don't have it, they'll take away our funding. So we got to make sure everybody has it before they can do anything at a site. So we have to verify name and address. When you go to volunteer, we'll need to look at your photo ID if it's the first time you're volunteering to confirm your identity. Make sure you have all the trainings or certifications done. It's a step that we are very good about not missing because it's a very important one. We don't want anybody walking in and be like, yep, I'm here to prepare someone's return, and then see all of their social security numbers and where they work and everything. So this one, we're skipping a little bit ahead. I'll go back towards the volunteer standards of everything. I just want to go over it. So this is the Vita certification tests. You can find all of that stuff, and there's a booklet that has everything. So you can see the actual test questions on here. So for example, so like for taking this, the volunteer standards of conducts one, the first question that everybody has to answer, is what must you do prior to working at a Vita site? And so you can take the exam before you even take the exam. You can pull up and print out what the test questions are. You can answer them. Anything you're not sure about, you can ask a site coordinator. Once you feel confident, then you can go into your Link Learn certification and then actually take the exam and put in your answers. And so these tests are available for everybody to be able to find. And it has all the different questions as well. So we have the advanced scenarios, which we'll go over in later trainings. Yes, I can. And so that's good. So grab the link. So hopefully that link works, but if you also just type in form 6744, it'll pull up on Google, because this is all public IRS publications. Print out. And so that has all of the exams, the basic, advanced, intake, volunteer standards, everything on it, as well as some additional resources about where to find answers potentially. So this is the same thing for like the advanced one. You click the launch, you'll get the introduction page. You'll have useful PDFs that might be that you could use to find answers. Inside the certification is just some of the steps. There's a back to go to the previous one, next question, skip a question, return to skip questions, drop down that allows you to jump to any question. As you can see from this picture, all of them are split up into scenarios that are kind of testing you on a specific topic. So like this first one, these 3 questions are all about filing status and determining the best filing status for each taxpayer. So they get broken down. So if you're not confident about a section, you can skip those, 3 to 4 questions, jump back to them later. Again, completely open note. So you can have as many web pages up as you open. You can have a chat open with any site coordinator while you're taking the exam if you have specific questions. We'll have study sessions slash test taking sessions where you can either come into like a Zoom call or in person, and we'll help go through the different exams while you're taking the exam. Because you can drop in and out of the exam at any point as well. You don't have to take it in one sitting. You can do half of it, take 24 hours because you're really busy, and then come back to it the next day. There's nothing stopping you from that. These are just some tips. So for fill in the blank, you enter full numbers, don't add dollar signs, commas, decimals, nothing like that. Negative numbers are with a minus, round to the nearest whole number. There's not a lot of fill in the blank, but there is a few for every exam. This is the review screen, so you can see what you've entered for each question, what you either filled in the blank or what you chose. It allows you to return to any question if it's not been filled out, or if you want to change it. Once you're satisfied, you click submit, and you'll get your results immediately. It'll tell you your total exam, if you got the question correct or not. It will not show you what the correct answer was, only what you chose and if it was incorrect or correct. So like for this one, it was incorrect. And then it tells you what to review in order to study it again and get an idea of what it should have been. But it will only tell you incorrect. It will not tell you what the correct answer was, because everybody is taking the exact same exam. The questions don't change. It's everybody takes the same exam. The only difference is if you take the retest questions are slightly different. They're just worded differently. So like if the first one was true, then they might word it so that the retest is false instead, but it's asking you about the same information. Circular 230, don't need to worry about unless you're authorized under Circular 230 to practice before the IRS. Puerto Rico tests we don't require. I've never seen a Puerto Rico tax return that we've had to do, and I've never heard of us being asked to do one. So doesn't really happen here. We'll get foreign student test. We appreciate if you could do, but it's not required. We have a lot of UNT students over at Denton North Branch Library on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. But us site coordinators are required to get the foreign student exam passed. So it's not required from volunteers, just really appreciated because it means you can do extra returns. And the site coordinator course you don't have required to do unless you are interested in becoming a site coordinator in future years, as it is a paid position. But you aren't required to take it. We've all taken it. Continuing education credit certificates. If you need continuing education credits, you can find those on the homepage to print as long as you meet all the requirements of the program. These are just some references about everything that I used, continuing educations, where to get your publications. So here's part one of the important websites. So biggest things, that Link Learn Texas certification, because you need to print or email that 13615 to Teddy once you finish it. This online self-paced training is a little extra Vita webpage that can provide some additional learning. It pulls up into this, but that one just shows you, here's the courses for volunteer standards, intake, interview. As well as the IRS can teach you all you need to know about their forms and instructions. It's not the easiest to learn about. The IRS uses a lot of technical terms and it's very dry, but with enough digging, you can find the answers to all the questions on there. So we'll start going through the actual parts of the trainings, starting with the volunteer standards of conduct. This one. So these get updated every year. So this is the 2023 return version. In case you didn't know what VITA stands for, it's Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. It's also part of Tax Counseling for the Elderly, TCE. So all Vita programs, we have to have the volunteer standards of conduct have to be passed. They have to be done annually, even if they've been volunteering for 30 years. Every year, you have to repass the volunteer standards of conduct as changes sometimes do come up. I don't think it's been changed in a decade, but maybe one of these days it'll need to be changed. And this is for us where we have to, approve and see that you are the correct volunteer. You passed everything, what date and time you did it. And it has to pass your government issued photo ID. So as a volunteer, there are six standards of conduct that you have to pass. First one is follow all quality site requirements or QSRs. Um, there's 10 of them, but you actually only need to really follow one or two of them. The others are us as site coordinators. We're in charge of maintaining and making sure it's being followed. And we'll go over all the quality site requirements just so you know what they are. Um, you cannot accept payment or ask for donations, accept refund payments for federal state tax returns from customers. Um, I have had times where this very nice elderly couples will come in and be so thankful that we were able to get their taxes done, and it took, less than an hour, and they'll try and give us a $20 bill. As we can't accept donations or payments. I always just tell them I really appreciate it. I'm glad you feel that we, helped you so much. If you really want to make a donation, you can go straight to United Way and make a donation saying, this is for all the thanks and help that we got for helping prepare taxes. But we ourselves, we can't accept any payment donations specifically for preparing somebody's taxes. This is a free benefit for people who make less than $64,000 a year. You cannot solicit business from taxpayers you help or use the information you gained about them for any direct or indirect personal benefit or for yourself, an individual, or an organization. If you see someone's a dentist and you want, hey, can I get a discount on my cleaning if, since I prepared your tax return? Can't do that. Nothing like that. You are uh, as you'll go through so many clients, you probably won't even be able to remember a lot of specific information about them. But you can't use anything you learn through Vita for your own benefit or for another organization. Number four, kind of self-explanatory. Don't prepare a false return as long if you know it's false. I've had people come in and have their own business and claim no income or like a bunch of expenses that just doesn't make sense. You have people who mention that they're retired and get retirement distributions, but not bring the retirement distribution forms. If you know something is wrong or feels off, let a site coordinator know and we'll come look at it further. All returns get quality reviewed. We'll go into that later. But if you feel that something is off and that, this is clearly not a true return, don't prepare it, let us know. We can refuse a tax return for any purpose as long as it doesn't violate their civil rights. So just if something feels off, let a site coordinator know. Another one that you would think seems obvious, don't be engaged in criminal, infamous, dishonest, notoriously disgraceful conduct or anything else that seems to have a negative effect on VITA programs. Kind of leads into six is just be professional, courteous, and respectful. Taxes can be a stressful matter for a lot of people, especially if they no longer are getting a refund that they're used to, either to like a child no longer being independent or their income being weird. This year, especially, the IRS changed how you do withholdings for all your W-2s. So employers might be a little off in how much they withhold. So people who are used to a refund might suddenly owe a couple $100s, and that could be very frustrating and overwhelming for a lot of people, as this is a low income program. So just be, professional, courteous, be understanding and empathetic. So that way they know we're here to help them. But we also can't lie to the IRS, and we want their return to be accepted and be correct. If you fail to comply with all these standards, it could be anything from removal from the programs. You could be completely barred from volunteering again. The site could get deactivated. All of our IRS products could be seized. So we have printers and ink and all sorts of stuff from the IRS to run this program. Grant funds. We can lose a whole lot of stuff in criminal investigation. So, just follow these six pretty easy to follow, I'd say, standards of conduct. I think it could be summed up as be a good person and don't accept payment. That's pretty much all it comes down to. Um, as well as so all tax information you receive is confidential, should not be disclosed to any unauthorized individuals, being anyone other than the taxpayer. So this is just the little table of conducts. I'm going to quickly go over some of the trainings. The exercises are what you'll see on the exam when you take the exam. So this is just a real introduction about, performing the best that we can. Make sure you have a volunteer conduct agreement signed each year that you volunteer. Make sure you review the quality site requirements. We have ethics training because in the past it's unacceptable practices. So now they've created a standard for everybody. So objective, listing the VCS, the volunteer standards of conduct. What's unethical? How do you refer outside for unethical behaviors? And then the consequences for if you don't comply with the standards. So again, this is the sixth VCS that I've talked about. That were designed specifically for this program. And then this is the QSRs, the quality site requirements. That is part of the first thing that you have to follow. Most of these are, like I said, not something you need to worry about. It's stuff that us as site coordinators have to worry about, and you just need to know of them. So the biggest one is certification is you have to pass using the online electronic tests, and then you have to send us an updated 13,615 every time you pass a new exam. It has to be higher than 80%. You have to take the intake, interview, and quality review exam to get that certification. If you pass that one, at the very least, you're able to intake and interview new people to make sure they qualify, they have all their documents, everything that they need. And that is all you'll be able to do as far as a volunteer. You have to pass a basic or an advanced exam in order to actually prepare tax returns. So you have to certify in a tax law to be able to talk about tax law questions and prepare correct tax returns. That's the basic and advanced exams. Site coordinators, we got our site coordinator training done annually. So QSR1 is just make sure we have to make sure everybody's certified, make sure you have your certified exams in order to volunteer. The second one is making sure that the intake, interview, and quality review process is being used correctly. So we use a form 13614C, which is the intake, interview, quality review sheet. That basically just lists all of the taxpayers' personal information. They'll list what income they have, what deductions, and then when you do intake and preparation, you just look over, make sure it matches the documents that they brought, make sure that they have a valid driver's license and a social security card or something from the Social Security Administration. And then the quality review is, so one person will prepare the return, then we'll have someone else completely that has the exact same certifications, will come in and basically do the return over again. They'll double check driver's license, social, look at the W-2s, look at retirement distributions, any income, make sure that it matches up with what the other person prepared. And so every return has to be quality reviewed by somebody else, by peer-to-peer. You cannot self-review. QSR3 is that we confirm photo ID and taxpayer identification numbers. Typically, that'll be driver's license for photo ID or passport. And then we need either their social security number, their ITIN if they don't have a social security number, And if they don't have their social security card, if we have something like their social security benefits, they'll get a statement each year that counts for the social security. We don't need it physically. They can have pictures of the social security numbers. Uh, the only thing that we have to have a physical copy of to see is a driver's license or any photo ID. And you do have to have the social security numbers for everybody on the return. So if they have 3 dependents, 3 kids, we have to see their socials as well for them to be included on the exam, on the return. And if we can't include them on the return, but we know they exist, we cannot complete the return because then it would be an incorrect return. QSR4 is a site coordinator thing. We just have to have all of these publications available to you on site. So since a lot of times we'll bring our own computers to a lot of different libraries, we have these auto set up to automatically pull up. These just have to be available for you to see and use. And that's a site coordinator thing. Volunteer agreement, that's another site coordinator thing, is that every time you come to volunteer, we check to make sure that you are who you say you are and that we have a 13-6-15 from you. And so it's a similar ID thing where we need driver's license, military ID, passport, something like that. So here's kind of like a show of who needs what. So everybody needs this volunteer standards of conduct training and certification. Everybody who's, for our purposes, a taxpayer or a quality reviewer or intake need to have the intake and interview passed. Then from there, if you want to be a tax preparer, you need a tax law certification, and us site coordinators have to have the site coordinator certification. And so that's just what we check, is to make sure you have all the certifications that you need in order to do the job that you volunteered for. Timely filing, this just means we have to have a process in place to ensure every tax return is filed quickly, delivered to the taxpayer. So we print out a return for them right before they leave. Once we've reviewed everything, we transmit at the very end of each site. And then within 24 hours, we'll check to see if what got accepted and what got rejected. And as site coordinators, we'll call them to let them know if they were rejected. And so that's just the process that we have. As volunteers, all you need to know is that if they ask, we're going to transmit them at the end of the site, and then here's your printed copy of your return to keep for your own records. Civil rights information. So the Civil Rights Act of 1964, we have posters. As site coordinators have to have those posters up. We put them up before you can even talk to a volunteer or someone who's here as a taxpayer. That is the very first thing we have to have up in order to do anything as far as Vita. Correct site identification number, you don't need to worry about, as we have those automatically pulling through. You just go ahead and start the return and it'll already know what site you're at. Same thing for the electronic filing number. It'll automatically pull in, and that's nothing that you'll have to worry about. And then security. So we try and have intake and preparations set up separately, keep people spaced apart, just to make sure everybody's information is secure and confidential as possible. We don't start yelling at the taxpayer when we're trying to get their social security number. We just keep it down on their table and we just type it in without speaking it aloud. Try and keep their personal information. So this is a little bit more detailed. It's the can't accept payment. Free means free, so we don't get anything for donations. There's no donation tip jar anywhere there. Nothing that makes it look like we're collecting money in return for return preparation. And they offer payment, refuse with a smile. Thank you. We can't accept payment for services. We can recommend if they want to bring cookies or donuts. We did have cookies. Someone brought cookies last week to one of our sites. Or they can make cash donations to the supporting organization, United Way. The do not solicit business, again, just don't take their information and use it for your own benefit or for business's benefit. We don't sell their information or use that. We do get consent that we can show the total number of returns and how much the refund or owed was for our own purposes, but we don't give out that information. That's just to let us know roughly, are we helping people get refunds? How many returns are we doing? Like just this past Friday, we checked to see how we compared to last year, and we're at 94% more returns at this point compared to last year. So almost double where we've been. It's approaching, the last time I did this was actually in 2020, and it's approaching where we were before that, right before COVID hit for return numbers. Because Vita just really couldn't work digitally. They tried to do it fully online, and it just didn't work for the program very well. This one's to not knowingly prepare false returns. If you something, like I said before, if something feels off, let a site coordinator know, and we'll handle it from there. If we just happen to miss something, then there's nothing wrong about that. It still can miss entering in some section of information, even with the quality review. But as long as we don't knowingly try and prepare a fraudulent return, there's no issues to or worried about anything like that. Biggest thing is, yeah, hardship on the taxpayer. It could be impossible to make payment. So they might try and want you to get a better credit through the earned income credit or get a child tax credit when it shouldn't be allowed. And so we have to be careful about the credits mainly. Earned income credit is the biggest one, as we are low income preparation service. And the IRS will crack down on the earned income credit being incorrect. Identity theft is getting very big. So any suspicion of identity theft, like if someone brings in a copy of a social security number and the driver's license looks, doesn't look quite right, or they're not sure about the information they have, you ask them where do they work and they're not sure, is a big thing. If you do have a suspicion about that, you'll report it to the IRS directly. You don't work with us at Vita. You report it directly to the IRS. Number 5, if you engage in criminal, infamous, dishonest, disgraceful conduct, we can bar you from participating. If you find another volunteer is violating the standards of conduct, there's this website right here, which is the investigative section for the VITA program at the IRS level. And so you just put your name, the site name, detailed description of what happened. Consequences, you can be barred from volunteering ever again, not just for the rest of the year. Treat all taxpayers in professional, courteous manner. We take pride in assisting people and doing this for free. You'll get lots of people. This is either their 10th year doing it, or it could be their first year just now finding out about it. And so they'll be super happy. Usually, sometimes if they have to owe, they'll start to get concerned about, why do I owe? How could this be happening? Just be understanding, empathetic, and do your best to support them, but make sure that the return is still correct and not being fraudulent. If anybody's civil rights are being violated, they have another email address for that. If you find somebody's civil rights are being violated, you're not sure how to report it or go about it. Due diligence is basically our way of saying that you, to the best of your knowledge, you did what was correct, what looked correct, nothing felt off. All the information, you were able to find the information and clarify any inconsistencies. If you're in doubt, you can seek assistance from us site coordinators, a tax preparer with more experience, have the taxpayer come back when they have additional documents. We won't really have to wait for more experienced tax preparers. All the site coordinators, we're all knowledgeable and know what we're doing. You still get a lot of fringe cases where we have to do research, but we all know how to do that research. And if something's out of scope or is extremely complicated, the site coordinators, we might advise them to go seek professional tax preparation, as that would be, it's something that we can't do. So who enforces it? It's the IRS enforces to make sure that the integrity is maintained and taxpayer confidence is there. Like I said, plenty of times and wrongdoing, you could put a cite, or you yourself could be barred from preparation. If an unethical situation is discovered at a level above, as a volunteer, like a site coordinator or other preparers, this is the email address, and you can find this online again, as well as this document is available to you at the site. If we determine that you violated the VSC, we'll have to remove you from the site and deactivate your access. At the end of each site, we'll deactivate your access, and when you come to volunteer again, we'll reactivate it. That's our normal process, but we'll disable it if you violate the VSC. There's the same email address as if to externally refer about the process. You can find the email. It's in a lot of places. Quality review sheet, the 730. We're required to have the 4836 displayed. You'll get added to a volunteer registry, which means no matter where you go, you'll be not allowed to join the Vita program. And if one unethical behavior can cause the entire program to potentially get shut down, lose sponsorships, lose grant funds, no longer allowed to be partnered with the IRS, basically. For the taxpayer, they can miss out on not having a return refund for several years if there's fraud and unethical actions happening. If you believe they're not telling the truth, you do a thorough interview to make sure there's no misunderstanding. If there's still doesn't resolve it, you'll come to a coordinator. If even then we don't feel comfortable with, then we are not required to prepare the return. As long as we don't violate their civil rights, you're over age 80, I can't do your return. That's not acceptable. But if we're just not sure about what the information they're giving and we don't feel comfortable with it, we are not required to prepare it, even if they waited an hour for their turn in line. If it just feels off, we are not required to prepare their return. So you are also protected as volunteers. So you're not receiving money for it. So you're a volunteer. The Protection Act is just make sure that we're not abusing you. We're not making you work 12-hour days with no pay. We're not kidnapping you from your real work office job and making you come help. This is all on a volunteer basis. You help out when you can help out, whether that's during the week at night or in the afternoons or on Saturday mornings only. Whatever you're able to do, we will take it, as we can use as many volunteers as we can get. Okay. So this is instructions for completing the VSC. Let's just take the exam, pass with an 80%. The best source for you is this publication 4961. That's basically the training word for word on volunteer standards. And almost, I can guarantee you with any question, if you can put Control F and put in a couple words about that are from the question, it'll be able to find it in there automatically and help give you the answer if you're not sure. So this is the first exam you should take before you take the quality review or intake exam. You just make sure you get the volunteer standards of conduct done. So if you have any problem, there's a not super long list, but victims discrimination, identity theft, federal refund inquiries, everything you should come to should point to us coordinators. And then if you feel like it's an ethical issue that a coordinator can't handle, then you use that email address that is found almost everywhere. So that way you can properly report anything that's unethical happening. Most of these, it's not going to be an issue. Common one that you might get is refund inquiries. People might come back after a week or two and be like, where's my refund? So you can just point them. There's on the IRS website, there's just a where's my refund section. You just point them to that, and then they'll be able to get back on their way. All right. So these ones are just some exercises included in there, meant to give you a idea about different situations and how you might approach them. Um, there'll be similar questions to these on the exam, but not necessarily the exact same scenario. And these are open-ended ones, whereas there'll be closed-ended questions on the actual exam. So we won't go over all of these because there is a lot of them. Um, So like this one, Teddy always would go over. It's kind of an example. So while she's completing Ryan's return, notes he's single. Ask him if they'd like, meet at a local bar. Prefer not to call him. Lily does not give up that easily, and she uses the personal phone number that she got from preparing the return to call him later in the week. And so, is there a VCS conduct violation? Yes, you took the personal information and tried to use it to get free drinks at a bar. Um, and so stuff that could happen to the volunteers, they could be barred from volunteering ever again. It's not quite serious enough that the IRS will shut down the site completely. But uh, if that information was used more maliciously, then that could happen, that the site could get completely shut down because the volunteers weren't keeping up with the standards of conduct. So brief summary. So some of them get updated, like I said, every once in a while. This one they haven't been updated in a while. You have to agree to the VCS outlined on the 13.615. There's no violations. If any violations discovered, there will be consequences. Usually the potential removal from the program completely. You are protected from liability. I guess I didn't go into that more, but if you prepare a return and the IRS rejects it, or 2 years from now they audit that return, you aren't held responsible whatsoever. It works through the Vita program, mainly Teddy, that will work with the IRS in getting that resolved. But you as volunteers are not held liable for any of that. Um, Even less like us site coordinators, we also fairly little liability when it comes to a return being incorrect or fraudulent. But you have even less than that, mainly because we want to have your assistance as much as possible. For the exercises, there's the answers. So it goes into greater depth. So yeah, volunteer. So like for the one with the bar, the VSC3 was violated because you used information from the taxpayer for the personal benefit. Remind them that they can't use taxpayers' personal information for their own benefit. Since it was not kind of a minor thing, she wasn't barred from ever volunteering ever again. So here is the volunteer standards of conduct agreement, which you'll be able to see online as well. It's 13.615. Here's when you complete the thing and you print out your volunteer agreement. This will get filled out. So it's got all your personal information, what certification levels you passed, any optional tests, and then we'll approve it and sign it. This is again the link learn taxes. So it includes access to all the courses, the trainings. When you take the volunteer standards of conduct exam, I'd recommend picking up this course in PDF format, like I said, and that'll have pretty much everything you need right there in that link next to it. That should be everything as far as the volunteer standard conduct. We'll go on to the next section. So the next section and exam you have to pass is the intake and quality review exam. So this is our little cheat sheet for what you need in order to do intake. So when you first greet the taxpayer, you need to verify they have the 2 sets of documents before you can even put them on the sign-in. They need to have a social security card, ITIN card or letter, a military ID, Medicare ID, SSA 1099, some sort of letter from the Social Security Administration that has their social security number and name on it. That has to be for the taxpayer, the spouse, and any dependents that they have or want to claim on their return. So you have to have that no matter what. We'll turn many people away because they didn't realize they need to have it. Everybody says don't take your social security card around, which is correct. Don't just carry it around. But for this one scenario, we have to have something for it. And it can be a picture from it. If it a picture, we just want to make sure it looks legit and real, that nothing's wrong with it. And then we have to have a photo ID from any government or school for the taxpayer and spouse. So driver's license, passport, school ID, a license to carry, etc. Those are pretty easy to understand. If it has a photo, their name, and like an address, it's probably a pretty valid photo ID that we'll use. Once they have those two, then you can put them on the list that we have. So that way we're preparing returns in order. You'll give them a 13614C intake sheet, ask them to fill it out, anything that's not shaded. Then they'll come back. If they have any questions about it, you need to be tax certified and answered to order those tax law questions. So if they ask, what are itemized deductions and what kind of numbers do I need for that? You need to be certified in either basic or advanced to help answer that. If you cannot, or if you're not certified, then you just need to go to another volunteer or site coordinator who is certified. A lot of the times, we'll have a site coordinator out there with intake no matter what anyways. But if it's really busy, you might get stuck out there for a little bit on your own. Just make sure that you are certified in basic or advanced if you're going to answer any of those questions. Once they complete it, you're going to compare their answers to the other side of this side to see what documents they might need. So if they mark that they had a job, a W-2, but they don't show you a W-2, then you need to ask them, hey, where is that? Or did you actually have a W-2 job, or was it self-employment? So the reason we do this is we don't want them waiting for an hour, get assigned to a preparer, and then all of a sudden we realize, oh, you don't have this 1099 that you need for us to file. We don't want them sitting there for an hour just to then be turned away the moment they get in through the door. So the intake people will review to make sure they have documents that match what they think they should have for their tax return. You'll also use that next to it. I don't have it pulled up, but on the intake, there's little in parentheses a B or an A next to each question. So if it has a B, that means only basic certification is needed. If it has an A, advanced certification is needed. Most of our preparers will be advanced, but you might have people that are basic only. So before you can match a taxpayer to a preparer, you have to make sure that they have the certification level necessary in order to prepare it. So that one was right there. So like for this example, so if they require an advanced certification, you might have them jump 1 or 2 spots rather than have an advanced preparer do something that's a basic return. So a lot of times that'll actually come down to foreign student, since we only have so many foreign student certified site coordinators. We might have a foreign student skip the line a couple rounds, so that way someone who can only prepare that is available versus having somebody else do an advanced when they could be doing something harder. So here's a cheat sheet. So advanced certification is necessary for all these documents. Again, that's on the 13.6.14, so you don't need to worry about it too much. You just look at the document and it'll tell you if you need advanced or basic. Foreign student, like I was talking about, or if they're not US citizens and do not have a green card or lived outside the US for a portion, mainly just students like at UNT or TWU. Stuff that is commonly out of scope was if they were married and both of them are not present, one of them has a power of attorney, or the taxpayer can claim head of household. You need tax certification in order to determine that. That's will make it out of scope, meaning we can't prepare their return. We have to unfortunately turn them away, as we can't do their return. They're bankrupt. They have small business involving inventory, so like Mary Kay, Tupperware, essential oils. If they employ other people, if they claim a lot of business expenses, if their personal business has a net loss, we can't prepare the return. Wash sales on sale of stock. a 1095A that lists somebody who they're not claiming on their return, and then rental income unless they're a member of the US Armed Forces. And so that's just a lot of common out of scope ones. There are a lot of out of scope situations. So if you're not sure about what is out of scope and what isn't, you can just come ask a site coordinator. We'll help research it or answer it for you. That way we don't, again, have them waiting for an hour. They come in, start to prepare and be like, oh, sorry, we can't actually prepare your return. One that actually isn't listed here is our hard income limit. If it's busy, we won't do anybody over 64,000 of income. So you just take a quick look at their W-2s, 1099s and everything and try and figure out roughly where their taxable income will be. If it's like a couple thousand over and it's not super busy, we'll do their return. But like I've had somebody come in with like over 100K of income. It's like, sorry, we can't do that. This is not what the Vita program's for. We're for low income taxpayers only and families to help get their taxes done for free and get the best refund they can get. So tips, if they have a bunch of receipts, make sure they total them ahead of us time for us. We will not total their receipts. We will not check every single receipt. We just want a rough idea for their total of charitable contributions or medical expenses or business expenses. And then if they want direct deposit, we need to have a check or an official document or a prior year return showing their routing and account number. This also does also count if they pull it up on their phone. But you just need to make sure they have a routing number and account number for that. Okay, so that was that one. I do have it, yeah. So this is the intake interview quality review sheet. So this is what it will have. It'll be yellow for English, green for Spanish. This is what every taxpayer will have to have in order to get their preparation done. So it's got all their personal information, name, address, the contact number in case the return's rejected, job title, date of birth. We have to know if they're totally and permanently disabled for the standard deduction, a student, can anybody claim them? Common one is this identity protection pin. That's if someone's ever tried to use your social to claim a tax return on instead of you. And then the IRS will reject any return that doesn't have an identity protection pin if it on their records they sent one. So we get a lot of rejects for people who don't know that they need an IP pin or they forgot to tell us about it. So that's an important one. Marital status and household for being able to determine their filing status. They need to list everybody who lived in their household or anybody they supported but did not live with in order to determine dependents. This is the part that they fill out. This one, the certified volunteer preparer, is what we'll fill out. As intake, you don't fill that out. It's only if you have tax law certification as intake that you can fill that out. This is the document section. It's like I was talking about. If it has a B here, that means it's basic. And if it has an A, it's advanced. All it takes is having one A as marked yes to make it advanced. They could have a bunch of A's or they can only have one. It still automatically makes it advanced certification. So they'll go and fill out yes or no. If they put unsure, you can ask them why they are unsure and what they answer their questions. Again, as long as it doesn't relate to tax law. So it's more just like, I don't know what a 1099 miscellaneous is. You can answer that and help them find the correct form if they need it or not. And if you change their answers, so like they put unsure, but it actually should have been yes, then you need to put your initials next to it. Just so that way we know who helped answer their question and correct it for them. Expenses, you won't get a lot other than itemized deductions, the medical, taxes, charitable contributions, all that. Most of these, you sometimes will have some student loan interest, but not often. So most of these will tend to be marked no. As well as most of this section will be marked no, unless they had health coverage through the marketplace. And that's another important one to check on them. We'll always ask it. and during preparation. But if they had health coverage to the marketplace and don't report it, the return will automatically get rejected and then they'll have to come back and correct it. And so we just want to limit as much as possible, making people come back for preparation. And so this is then just additional information that you don't necessarily need to look over other than to make sure that they filled it out. You know, if they want IRS to contact them in Spanish, the only thing you really need to check is this direct deposit to make sure they have that bank account information. Uh, the rest of this, the preparers will mainly use for filling out the return. This is just demographic questions that the IRS uses for statistical purposes to see who we're best helping. You know, do we have a lot of Hispanic or Latino? Do we have a lot of Asian? And what areas is that mainly being done? And this is something for the taxpayer to sign. It's basically saying, they disclose our tax information to other Vita sites? So like they prepare it at one of our libraries, but they come move or go to some other site and they want to be able to see their return. They need to have signed and dated this as well as in the return in order for us to get that information and exchange it. So that's the 13,614. Whether you're doing intake or preparation, this will basically be your bread and butter of being able to fill out the return and make sure they're good to go. You just need to make sure that if they mark W-2 and two jobs, that they have two W-2s. And that counts for both spouse and the original taxpayer. And so, yeah, so the basic and advanced. On the sheet, there'll be a section for you to circle if it's basic, advanced, foreign student, Spanish speaking. There's all sections for that on the sign-in sheet. So you just circle, yep, this is advanced, and then write who it was assigned to once there's somebody available for preparation. So this is the intake interview quality review training.
Can we take a short break?
Yeah, you want to take like a 5-minute break?
Okay.
Get,
Yeah,
get
that'd be great.
refills, go to the bathroom.
Thanks.
Yep, Nora. Looks like you're muted. It's not pulling through the sound. Oh, still not working. Nope, nothing. See if it's a question, you can go ahead and try and type it in chat, then it'll answer it that way. Okay, so you're an enrolled agent. Let's see. So in that case, you'll still have to do the volunteer standards intake interview quality review. Um, recommend that you take the advanced exam, as you should be more than prepared for that. And then unless you are planning on doing anything for Circular 230 professionals, you don't have to take that one. But that one can count for, I believe EAs, you have to have like continuing education type stuff as well as additional testings. Um, so the 230, I believe, does count for that as an exam. Okay, then yeah, so then you don't need to take it then. Just the volunteer standard core conduct, the intake interview, and then if you want to do preparation, the advanced or basic exam. And then for the signing and signing out, Nora, if you could give me your last name, just that way I can make sure we have you signed in and out correctly.
I'm back.
Welcome back. Yes. Okay, so this is the last thing before we'll kind of go over I'll actually show you the exams for both. Um, so we'll probably be done in the next 40-ish minutes, I would expect. So this one's again, it's talking about the 13614C. So you have to have passed the intake quality review with 80%. You need to certify in tax law prior to completing tax law related tasks. The quality review training, which you can find right here. It's also just called publication 5325. So QSR, it's a requirement that the 13614C is completed for each tax return prepared. That's the sheet that I was going over with that you put everybody's personal information in. All sites use it. So for every return, we have to have one of those sheets filled out. And if we're doing prior year returns, they have to fill it out again for that prior year. So we can do up to 3 years prior. So we can do someone's 2020 tax return as well at all of our sites. We just have to have the same information, driver's license, social, all the documents. So into this training, you'll be able to consistently intake interview, know the different sections, complete the basic steps of intake interview and quality review. So here's a highlight from last year's reviews. So big one that all of us, even as site coordinators, are bad about is so when you quality review or return, you need to initial the intake form on the back. So a lot of times if we're super busy and we're jumping around, we'll forget to initial or sign our name on the back. That's a really big one. Making sure they completely fill out the form. So even if the answer for some documents is no, they need to mark that no, they do not have those documents. Um, you cannot use the prior tax year return to verify their identity. Has to be a photo ID and a social and something with the social security number from the Social Security Administration. We cannot use, oh, here's my return that you guys did last year. Here's my social. Cannot do that. Has to be a new document. So intake process, uh, greet them, make sure they're here to actually get their taxes done. We're in libraries for the most part, so not everybody is there to get their taxes done. They're just there for, books or other programming. Explain how the intake and interview will work and that somebody will quality review it at the end. Make sure they have all their documents, like I said, so using the 13614C, make sure that their documents match up with that. Determine if it's basic, advanced, or foreign student, and then assign them to somebody who has the proper certification level. So greet the taxpayer, you say hello, good morning, nice to meet you. We're here. Are you here for Vita? Make sure they're just there to get their taxes done, or if they have something else that they need to discuss, make sure if it's tax law related, you're certified or come to a site coordinator. Explain that they need to have the 13614C done, then interview them, make sure that they filled it out correctly and have all the documents they need matching what they filled out. Let them know that they'll get quality reviewed by someone other than the preparer. At intake, you also still verify identity. We'll do it again at the preparation stage, but make sure that they have a photo ID. Site coordinators, we can occasionally make exceptions if they're known to the site. If they've been coming to this program for 20 years, they're always very talkative and we all know them, then we don't always require the photo ID. That'll be very rare, not something you'll need to worry about. So required documents, the photo ID for taxpayer and spouse if they're married filing jointly, social security card for everybody on the tax return. That is a common one. They forget a kid's social or they don't want bring it. Make sure they can have a photo of it, does not have to be physically in front of us. And then proof of income, expenses, and life events as detailed on the 13614C. So if they say they have a W-2, make sure they have the W-2. Everything needs to be yes or no. And if it's unsure, discuss it with them to change it to yes or no. And if you do change something on their 13614, you need to initial next to it to let us know that you went over it with them and confirmed the answer. So methods for completing it, they can complete it before they even come to the site. A lot of times we'll hand it to them when they check in to fill out at the site. And then if they need additional assistance, you'll help them during the interview. We have it in English and Spanish, but if they really need a different language, we can find all of them online. However, translating the different language could be a little bit more difficult. Determine what the certification level is, follow the B's and the A's for basic or advanced. Military, we don't have any military bases near us, so I don't expect us to see that. It would also make it out of scope as none of us have military preparation certification. As far as I know, I don't think anybody has taken military. So then this is the determining the scope. So you have to make sure that's something that we can do and that we have volunteers able to do. If they're advanced, we'll always have people with advanced because we'll have 2 site coordinators on site at all times. If it's out of scope, which we can see on the 4012, which I'll go over late after this, then we just say, unfortunately, sorry, we can't help you. It's outside of our scope. You need to see a professional preparer. If it's something like it's just out of our income level, you can actually recommend they look into AARP tax prep as they have higher limits than we do. as well as they can do married filing separately. So you can assign it. So we'll just see, you'll see who's available and ready to prepare a return, make sure they have the right certification, and then you'll let the taxpayer know, guide them to their preparer and give them a brief introduction. It's like, this is so-and-so Clint. He's, got these documents. This is Ron. He'll be your preparer. So overview, confirm that they have a driver's license or passport is your usual photo identification, and that they have an SSN or ITIN directly from the Social Security Administration. We can have pictures. It does not have to be a physical copy. Make sure that 13614C is filled out. Interview them to make sure what they have on this matches what they're showing in their documents. Unless you're tax certified, you don't need to worry about making sure that their filing status and dependency determinations are done, and then review the documentation, make sure that they have everything. And again, because it's very important, you need to verify the identity with a photo ID and a social security number or ITIN. Every single taxpayer, even if we saw them an hour earlier, you need to re-verify their driver's license and their social. The known to the site, you don't need to worry about. So when you're reviewing it, you look at the information they completed, engage in a conversation. Usually we don't want to say is how many dependents did you have with you? It's how many people live with you? Did you have any kids living with you? Are they under the age of 17? Stuff that's more conversational than do you have this? Do you have this? One, because it makes it easier for them to not tell the truth about if they have something. And two, it just makes them feel more comfortable that you're just having a conversation with them. You're not interrogating them about their personal information. The due diligence is, make sure you're doing your part to ensure the information is correct. You can't rely on information from a taxpayer without requiring documentation. It's like if they have their own personal business, they can't just say, oh yeah, I have $500 of expenses. You need to, interview them a little bit, make sure they have bank record statements of it or a stack of receipts that they added up for that information. It's like this one, yeah. They say they earned 20,000, but they didn't prove earnings, but they did bring expense receipts. So it's one of those cases where you really shouldn't feel comfortable preparing it, and then ask a site coordinator due to the questionable information. And if that's the case, as site coordinators, we also probably will tell them we can't do your return. We need some sort of verification, not only for our own safety, but for the taxpayer. If the IRS decides to audit them, they'll have to be able to prove what they told us. So this is just talking about good ways to ask questions. So you mark that you'll be claiming your grandchild. How long did they live with you? I see you have a pension. What are your other sources of income? Not just going through a blanket list to check mark what they do and do not have, asking open-ended questions, stuff that they can't easily answer without giving more details. So this one, so sometimes an entry raises additional questions. If they're married filing jointly and they have a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, they probably need to have childcare expenses in order to be able to work. So you can ask about that. Did you pay any? How much do you have a statement? Because they could potentially get a credit for it. If they're over the age of 70 and they're not getting Social Security benefits, that's something that should be incorrect. They should be receiving Social Security benefits. You need to figure out why they either didn't include it or if they just forgot it. They mark no that nobody can claim them, but they're a 20-year-old student living with their parents still. That technically qualifies them to be claimed as a dependent. You need to make sure that they are marking if they are going to be claimed correctly or not, because it'll reject the other return if it's mismarked. So verify that the names match the Social Security cards and photo IDs. If they're a resident or non-resident, we'll follow the flow chart for that to make sure we can perform that return. Stuff like, if they're a full-time student, legally blind, like I talked about, that has multiple tax law issues that fall into that. Make sure that they are an actual full-time student. This is your personal information because it changes what the higher standard deduction is. And a lot of these, if you do your own taxes or just once you complete the advanced exam, you'll get a very clear idea of everything and it'll all make sense. But each section, even if you're not completely confident on what all it means tax-wise, just need to make sure that it is filled out, make sure it's filled out correctly. A lot of times you'll get people to be like, oh, yes, I am married, but they married in January, not in 2023. So that makes a big difference for their return. Household information. We're back and forth on if people should put in like if they have roommates for this one. So this one, it says it's everyone who lived with you other than your spouse. So like, if they're college students and they have 3 other roommates, technically we want them to put that in there so that way we can check if they should be dependents or not. They're not going to be dependents. They're just fellow students that they're living with. But we do ask that they fill this out to the best of their knowledge. Most people will choose not to put them unless they know they should be claimed because they're children or disabled parents or relatives or something like that. But we do ask that if they lived with anybody, they should list them. Income, it's like we've already gone over, yes, no, unsure. If they're unsure, you need to help them figure out if it should be yes or no. Self-employment income, you need to be much more extensive about because that can change a lot of credits as well as it's something that'll get looked at more by the IRS. So you need to ask a lot more questions about, oh, what kind of income did you have? Was it consistent? What were your expenses? Do you have any forms to support the income? What about receipts for the expenses? Was it contract work or did you find the work on your own? Lots of questions like that. A lot of times you'll get Uber and DoorDash will be the biggest self-employment. So you need to double check that they have the 1099Ks or other statements from Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, that they work that they'll be able to claim mileage, expense, and everything. So this is the same thing. So ask probing questions. If they marked yes to something, ask, do they have their 1099-R? And is that their only distribution, for an example? They mark yes for interest dividends and to provide 4 interest statements, but state another one that they don't have a document for. Let the preparer know about that. And then we'll decide from there if that's an includable income or not. Usually we're not worried about people saying they have more income than they have documentation for because most people don't want to tell the IRS they have more money. It's definitely much more the expenses if they should have expenses, but they're not claiming or talking about the expenses or they seem unreasonable. So this is for the deductions and credits. Again, you're mainly only ever going to see this line 4, maybe some child dependent care, teachers' expenses you can get occasionally, but it's much more the income section that will need to be filled out correctly, but it is good to check the expenses. And if you look over the itemized deductions when you're going over their documents and you see that it looks like they're not going to be higher than the standard deduction, you can go ahead and put a note that it's going to be best to take the standard deduction. The preparer will go over that again with them, but while you're there and you notice it and there's no other people in line and you're tax law certified, you can go ahead and tell them, okay, thank you for bringing this information. You're probably not going to itemize as the standard deduction will be more beneficial for you. This is just the life events. I like to call it the miscellaneous section because they just throw anything that falls in under there. Energy efficient homes, EIC credit disallowed, HSAs, capital loss carryovers. They just throw anything and everything kind of in this section. So a lot of times it'll be no, but if there is yes, you need to look into it in more depth, ask some questions. Additional information is the demographics. biggest thing is the direct deposit. Make sure they have bank account information. If they don't, tell them we can do a paper check. It'll just take a bit longer to get there. But we can't, they can't just tell us the account number. We need to see something with the account number, whether it's on their app or a check or a bank statement. They can't just know their account number or write it down on a piece of paper. This is the global carry forward that I talked about. So that's if they're okay with having any Vita site be able to pull up their return for them. Just need to have a name and signature and date. So actually preparing the return, you take the 13614C and all their supporting documents, and then you put it in the return and you start going through and filling out the return. That'll be covered by the advanced certification trainings that are happening later in the week. But for the most part, it's pretty similar to what you do as intake. You just go through the forms again, enter them in, make sure they match, make sure if there's any other documents they should have or information they withheld. Then the quality review. Every site has to have a quality review. Ours is a little bit more in-depth than what the IRS says they at minimum need to be. Because when we quality review, we have someone go through the entire return again. They check social, driver's license, go through every document, re-interview them about what they've marked yes and no, double check about health insurance, dependents. We'll go through basically the entire return over again, which is more than what the IRS minimum standard is. So as far as the IRS standards, it has to be reviewed by another volunteer or site coordinator other than who prepared it with the same certifications. You can have a designated reviewer who their entire purpose is to just review returns. We don't have that. We do peer-to-peer, where it's any preparer can go ahead and quality review a return. As site coordinators, we'll try and avoid having you as volunteers quality review. But if it's busy or you're just the one available while someone else is reviewing your return, we might ask you to go ahead and quality review another return. And it's nothing to freak out about. Like I said, it's just you're going through the return again. If it all looks and makes sense to you, then that's an acceptable quality review. We're not going to hold you liable if you both the preparer and the quality reviewer miss something. That's not on you as volunteers. But for the most part, we'll try and have us as site coordinators be the one who reviews returns that you do. Kind of in that vein as well, if we have two preparers and one site coordinator preparing returns, we'll prioritize giving you as preparers the returns to prepare so that we can quality review and deal with intake or any other problems that arise. So if there's a tie for who could prepare, it's going to go to you as volunteers, just so that way we can make sure that all of our volunteers are engaged and assisting. So the key components is the taxpayer still has to be there for the quality review, make sure they can understand and agree with what we put on their tax return, make sure the 13614 is completed properly, and then review all the supporting documentation to confirm they were entered correctly. Those are the three major parts of a quality review. If there's an error, we need to correct them with the taxpayer, verify everything listed on the checklist and the 4012 are addressed when we review. If you have any concerns, there's the 4012 and this publication 17 are your best buddies for being able to figure out what should be entered and how it should be entered. And then inform the taxpayers before they sign that the return is their responsibility. That by signing this tax return, they looked over the return and the forms and that they agreed to the accuracy of what they provided and what we entered. The final steps is once all the errors have been corrected, nothing found in the quality review, it's all complete. Best practice is compare it to the prior year tax return. We don't usually do that because we don't have them bring in their prior year returns unless they want to. Double check one last time before we print it and get it ready to sent to the transmission queue that everything, the taxpayer agrees with everything and it all looks correct to them, and then they'll go ahead and sign it. So you won't have to worry about this as much. This is mainly for site coordinators, where we'll print a set for them. They'll sign the 8879, which is what allows us to e-file it on their behalf. And then they get all of their relevant worksheets, as well as the first 2 pages of the 1040. And it's already set up to automatically print that. You won't have to worry about it as the preparers. All you have to do is make sure that they sign the 8879. So that's allowing us to e-file it. So you have to advise them verbally about the accuracy of the information they prepared. So when I bring them the 8879, my go-to is, this is the 8879. When you sign here, you're agreeing that you allow us to transmit the return on your behalf, and that all the information you given us is the truth to the best of your knowledge. Because there are situations where they don't know about income. So it's not, I don't want to accuse them of lying. It's just they didn't know about the information. But as far as they know, they gave us the information to the best of their knowledge. If a joint return, both the taxpayer and the spouse have to sign it. We don't do the known to cite for not filing the 8879. We do require that they have to have both the taxpayer and the spouse there. We don't do that exception. And then here's all of the references. Really the only one you need to know, publication 17, the 13614C, the rest of these, and the 4012, the rest of them you won't really need to worry about. It's just extra stuff that we have to have available. This is the summary, just the intake, the 3 distinct processes. Moral of the story, make sure the form 13614C is fully completed for every tax return. You may assist them in completing it. You cannot answer tax law questions unless you are certified basic or advanced. But if they just have questions about what kind of forms revolve to what, that you can answer. We use the quality review checklist. That's mainly as site coordinators, but if you do have to quality review, you can find that in the publication 4012. Taxpayer has to be there during the quality review. They have to be informed verbally before they sign it that it's their responsibility for the information provided. And we cannot transmit a return before there's been a quality review and we have a signed form 8879. You won't have to worry about transmitting. Just make sure if you do end up quality reviewing, or honestly, if a site coordinator comes in quality reviews, make sure someone initials the 13614, because we will get busy and miss it, but we have to have it initialed for who quality reviewed a return. So this is the stuff that we just covered. You don't need to worry about that too much, as I think I've more or less repeated the same thing 3 or 4 times, because that's more or less what this training is repeat, repeat, repeat. Make sure that everything is covered. So this is the 4012. This will be your bread and butter. This will have everything that you could possibly need about how to start a return, filing status, dependents, what kind of income, adjustments, everything. And so your best bet is Control F to find exactly what you need to find, because otherwise you're going to be scrolling through, I think it was 310 pages. So if you need something to put you to bed, you can go ahead and read this at night, and then you'll be really prepared to volunteer. I personally won't do that, but you are more than welcome to. So when you're taking the exams, any of the exams, this is one of your best resources. This will be able to answer a lot of your questions, especially for the basic and advanced tax certification exams. Because, for example, the first 7 questions are just about how to determine filing status. Well, here's an entire decision tree as well as additional information to determine what the filing status is. And so you can just follow this guideline and that'll be able to answer a lot of your questions for the exams. Go back to the top. The only section you'll personally you'll need to use on a consistent basis potentially is this scope of service. So some of these, this will list, okay, so they have dependents and they have only a W-2. That means you only need basic in order to have the certification. But if they have unreported tips, that means if someone only has basic, they can no longer prepare it. So you just, whatever shaded in means you can't do that. So if they have military compensation, they have to have military certification. And so that's for assigning who can prepare what kind of returns. So if you're ever unsure about what certification levels are needed, either ask a site coordinator or go to the 4012 and you'll be able to find that information quite easily. Let me pull. So on here is also so then I guess, oh yeah, it's still in these ones. So these ones they'll describe what is out of scope. So if they have distributions from education programs that exceed their qualified education expenses, it's immediately out of scope for us. Nobody can prepare that. It is immediately something that Vita cannot do. It's a complex tax matter that we're not equipped to handle. If there's calculation with the premium tax credit, it's out of scope. So if you're ever not sure about what we can prepare, or if it's a really unique scenario, you can check the 4012, see what is out of scope for us. If they have a tax penalty because they didn't pay enough, it's out of scope. And so there's a lot of things that are in scope, but there is still quite a few things that are out of scope for us as a Vita tax preparation. The biggest one you'll see is if they're married filing separately. We cannot do a married filing separate return at Vita. So if they find out through the interview that they're married at some point in 2023, at the end of December 31st, but they're not filing together or the spouse isn't there, cannot do that return. That's sorry, but we can't help you. Check with AARP would be the best resource, or go pay for it at a professional firm. Okay. So other than going through the actual test, no, the system will not automatically determine what is out of scope. Because we use the TaxSlayer software, which anybody can use. So it just is set up to do all taxes. It'll not automatically determine it. So if you're not sure if it's something that we can do, ask a site coordinator and we'll probably know or look into it, as well as you check the 4012. A lot of times it's going to be some really weird, complex tax issue that'll cause it to be out of scope. So if it feels really complicated, you have no clue how to do it, probably not something we can do. Probably need to get a paid professional to do that. So before I go through the 6744 and just kind of show you the test questions for both the VCS and then the intake and quality review, is there any questions for me about all the information that we just went over?
This is kind of just random, but in your experience, is it mostly just people bringing in a W-2, or do most people have like a lot of complicated stuff?
So it'll typically be probably about, I'd say on average, 4 forms of varying either income or expenses. We've had people with 7 W-2s for 1 year. They could have a W-2, a retirement, an SSA. They could have Uber and Lyft in a W-2. So you occasionally will get the simple ones of 1 W-2, but more often than not, it'll be a couple sources of income, maybe some sort of credit or deduction you need to claim. Say probably about 40% of the time it'll be a family, so you'll need to double check dependent socials or if they need to have a spouse there or not. But then we do get the complex ones every once in a while where they have lots of income and it has expenses and personal self-employment, but they also want to deduct and itemize, and it can get pretty complicated. But for the most part, I'd say on average, the return is not too complex.
Oh, thanks.
Any other questions or anything? All right. So to kind of like wrap it up, I'm just gonna go over the test questions. These are the exact same ones you're gonna see when you go ahead and take the exam. If you're attending the later sessions, like the tax prep session starting tomorrow through Thursday, I recommend you try and take these 2 exams tonight. And if you have any questions, you can get in contact us through the email that I believe was provided with the Sign Up Genius. So as you're taking the exam, if you have any questions that you're not sure about, you'll be able to contact us through that. But I'm very briefly just going to kind of go through the questions and through like the process of determining how you would find that information or how you would come to the answer that you come to. So this is the volunteer standards of conduct exam. It's a whole 10 questions. You got to get 80%. And you do have 2 attempts for every exam, whether it's the intake, the basic, advanced. So this first one, so prior to working at a Vita site, all Vita volunteers, such as greeters, taxpayers, reviewers, must annually pass the VCS certification test with 80%, sign and date the Form 13615, which is the Volunteer Standards of Conduct Agreement, pass the Advanced Law Certification, all of the above, or both A and B. So all of this information you'll be able to find through this link, the Volunteer Standards of Conduct course, which is also just the publication 4961. So if you're ever not sure about it, you can go to this document. It's a whole 28 pages, so it's a lot faster than the advanced exam. So you'll answer that as you think it should be. Number 2, can you volunteer be removed and barred from the Vita program for violating the VCS? I think I went over that quite a lot on what the consequences are for, not following the 6 requirements that as a volunteer you have. Taxpayer offers you a $20 bill because they were so happy about the quality of service. What's the appropriate action? Take the $20. Tell them it'd be better to have it deposited directly into your bank account from your refund. Thank the taxpayer and explain that you can't accept payment, or refer them to the tip jar conveniently located at the print station. 4 is a tax law certified volunteer preparer. When he prepares the return, they find that Jill does not have a bank account to receive a direct deposit. And when she's distraught, Jake tells them the paper refund check will take 3 to 4 weeks longer instead of direct deposit. They ask if Jake can deposit the refund on her behalf and then turn the money over her to when he gets it. What should Jake do? He can offer to use his account or say that he cannot use the account through a Vita volunteer bank account and she'll have to open up her own account, or suggest that she borrows a bank account from a friend because the name does not have to be on the bank account. Question 5, prepares a tax return at a Vita site, finds out that during the interview they have no health insurance. After Allie leaves, writes her name and contact information down to take home to his wife, who sells health insurance for profit. Which of these statements is true? There's no violation unless Max's wife makes a big commission on the sale. He's violated it because he used the information he gained to further his own or another's personal benefit. He's doing Allie a favor by using her personal information to secure business for his wife, or information the taxpayer provides at Vita can be used for the volunteer's personal gain. Like that one, again, pretty straightforward. A lot of this I went over again and again because it is important that we follow these standards. Bob, a certified volunteer preparer, told the taxpayer that cash income does not need to be reported because the IRS does not know about it. Bob indicated no cash income on the form 13614. prepared a return excluding the cash income. The designated quality reviewer was unaware of the conversation and therefore unaware of the cash income. And the return was printed, signed, and e-filed. Who violated the volunteer standards of conduct? This one could be a little bit tough because it involves two people, the person who initially prepared it and who quality reviews it. So you just need to think about who knowingly prepared a fraudulent return. Was it Bob or was it Jim, the quality reviewer? Or did nobody violate the VCS? And it's okay to ignore cash income. And then random Betty, the site coordinator who was overseeing all this and happened to have that return go through. Sue was watching the local news when she saw Aaron, a new law certified volunteer, in a story about bank employees being arrested for embezzlement. 3 days later, Sue was shocked when the Aaron shows up at the site ready to volunteer. Pulls Aaron aside and explains that his arrest on suspicion of embezzlement can have a negative effect on the site and asks him to leave the site. Sue removes his access to the software and then uses the external referral process to report it to the spec headquarters. Did Sue take appropriate actions as the coordinator? Yes or no? That one, I think, again, is also pretty straightforward. We do we'll do background checks right before you come to volunteer, but you don't need to stress about them. You can volunteer while it's in progress, but we do have to, you can be removed from them ever being a volunteer if you are engaged in criminal activity. Like we mentioned, that's one of the VCSs. Sam is assigned to prepare a taxpayer's return. Been waiting a long time due to the volume of service. The taxpayer is agitated. How should Sam interact with the taxpayer? Keep calm, create a peaceful, friendly atmosphere, remain professional and courteous, or all of the above. That one pretty straightforward. We want all of our taxpayers to, I guess enjoy is not quite the right word doing taxes, but we want them to feel confident and okay that we're the ones preparing their return and that we're going to be as professional as quick as we can. Vita sites and volunteers must not solicit business from taxpayers or use taxpayer information for personal or business benefit. Similar to the other question that we asked, that is one of the VCSs is about, using taxpayer information and if that's okay or not. And then the last one is Ben is preparing a tax return that has a dependent listed. The dependent is the child of a taxpayer's cousin. The child lived with the taxpayer a few months. Ben prepared the return and noted on the 13-614, the child lived with the taxpayer all year. Did Ben violate the VCS? And so that one comes down to is, we need to, when you prepare a return, it needs to be truthful to the best of your knowledge. And so that'll help you answer that one. So that's the 10 questions that you'll see. You get 2 tries. You need to get 80%. I am 99.9% confident that you'll be able to pass it first try without breaking a sweat. And then so it shows you the retest questions, which are different variations on what the original retest is. Let me jump to this one. So this is the intake, interview, and quality review questions. I'll go through these ones even quicker. As you can, when I took this exam, I pretty much had it directly pulled up the training, and you are able to find almost word for word everything on this training that we went over. So this one is also very easy to go over. So what form just has to be used when we're performing a thorough interview? I've been saying this over and over again, what form it is. So hopefully you should be able to answer this one pretty quickly. The certified volunteer preparer must verify the return is within the certification level as part of the intake and interview process. Been going over this over and over again. Taxpayer answered yes to form 13-614 tip income. What certification level is needed to prepare the return? So for this one, it's included. There's an example of it in here that you'll be able to see. But if you're not sure, you can just pull up the 13-614C and you can see, oh, look, there's tip income. So what do I need to answer? Mark the widowed box on the form 13-614 and then but left the year of spouse death field blank. The year of spouse's death is needed. Not to give the answer, but everything on the form needs to be filled out if it's relevant. So I kind of gave the answer there. Which IRS publication would a volunteer use to determine if a topic is out of scope? For this one, you use the bread and butter publication, which is the one I talked about right here. It's our big deal. This one is everything you might need to know is on this one. Vita sites are required to conduct quality reviews of every return. I went over that a bunch. What information must a volunteer review to prevent the possibility of identity theft? This one is the thing that we've always been talking about. That you need to have photo ID and social security number, and we need to be able to see them. It can't be from a prior year return. Taxpayer signs the tax return after a quality review and after being advised of their responsibility of the accuracy of their information. Is this statement true or false? You can quality review a tax return you just prepared instead of waiting for someone else to quality review the return. This one, it's a big deal again. We take it even a step further by doing it completely over again. And which of the 4 critical processes for quality review is not correct? So this one, you may, not to give the answer, we may use Google for finding information, but we need to use the 4012 or something from the IRS to determine exactly what is correct. We cannot just use some other random blog or website. So hopefully that's a good guide for you to be able to answer these questions. They're pretty straightforward. And if you do have any questions, you can contact us through the email in the Sign Up Genius. Or if you're not sure about it and you don't finish it up and you're coming to one of the later trainings, if you show up just a few minutes early, you can ask me then, hey, I have this question on the intake training. Can I go over it with you before we start the next training? And I'll be able to answer it then. So as we go ahead and wrap it up, was there any other last minute questions, comments, questions, concerns? All right, then I will go ahead and stop the recording of this one.